and welcome to the Non-Boss Audits and Investigations. And thank you for joining me for another episode of the Scientology Chronicles. Before we get going, I just want to kind of take a moment and I just want to thank all of you guys for the interest in this series, where we go through various government agencies, declassified documents, and investigative interviews obtained through FOIA requests. And for those that may be interested, season 1 of the Scientology Chronicles is now available as an audio podcast on several platforms such as Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, and many others. Apple is still taking their sweet time. Apparently, it takes 2 to 3 weeks to get approval when you submit your podcast to them, but it is in the works. I also want to thank all of the new listeners that have found this content through whatever audio podcast or platform that you use. And if you're interested in seeing any of the actual documents that we do discuss during these episodes in the audio version, all the episodes can be found on my YouTube at the Non-Boss Audits and Investigations. And no matter what platform you listen to my content on, please take a moment, give it a like, give it a subscribe or a follow. And as always, please leave me a comment with your feedback about the episode. All right, guys. Tonight, we are going to be, this is an in-depth one. It'll end up being like a bonus episode on the audio podcast. This one is kind of crazy. I'm going to play my trigger warning intro. If you haven't heard it and you haven't seen it, I'm going to play that now before we get started and jump right in. Okay? So hold on tight. One more minute. Sorry, guys. Wrong intro. Wrong intro. Here. Before we dive into today's episode, I want to take a moment to address something important. Today, we will be discussing some sensitive topics and information that may be distressing or triggering for some listeners. Your mental health and well-being is a top priority. If at any point you feel uncomfortable or overwhelmed, I encourage you to take a break, step away, or seek support from a trusted friend, family member, or a mental health professional. Remember, it's okay to put yourself first. Taking care of your mental health is crucial, and there are resources available if you need them. I've included some helpful links and contact information in the show notes for anyone who may need support. Thank you for listening, and please take care of yourselves. Okay, so tonight we are going to be diving into, it's a very lengthy document, and that's why I decided to just do a live on it. It's it's another document, and we see the destruction that Scientology has on families. And in a lot of the previous episodes, we've definitely came across a lot of documents where people have ended up having mental breakdowns. Up until I came across this document, I really always thought that the main reason for people having all of these mental breakdowns were really related to the auditing sessions. And it's a theme, right? And through all of them. But when I saw this document and this story, it made me think just a little differently. Not that the auditing sessions don't cause people to have mental breakdowns, but I think in this document you're going to see why there could be another cause or an underlying cause of these mental breakdowns, in addition to and coupled with the auditing sessions. All right. So let me pull up this document. Give me 1 second, guys. Let me share it. And I think, oh, I'm scrolled all the way down. Hold on 1 second before I throw it up on the screen for you guys. Again, this is a very lengthy document, several pages. Oh goodness. Where am I? Okay, here I am, right? Yes, here I am. Because I had there were actually a couple of versions, and there was one version that was more clear than the other version. So I want to make sure I was pulling up the right one. All right. I'm going to jump right in here, guys. Okay, so this is another it's an interview with an FDA agent, Food Drug Administration. Um, this this document is from November 19th, 1968. Okay. Now, you're going to hear a whole lot of names, and what I'm going to try and do before we get going, I want to just kind of tell you guys, there are certain sections I'm going to kind of jump as we go along. Reason is because this is an entire family that this happened to. Okay. And there are so many names. I just don't want anybody getting confused. All right. So I'm going to try to limit all of using everybody's names as they're listed throughout this document. Okay. Just for the sake of time. And I don't want to bore you guys absolutely to death. All right. Okay. So this document, again, is from November 19th, 1968. This document is about a family in the Dallas area. Okay. And they made a consumer complaint to the FDA. Now, the complaint is about more along the lines of the e-meter and more along the lines of these supplements and vitamins that L. Ron Hubbard were selling at the time. Now, I did do, if you haven't seen it, it is on my channel. Also, it's on Chicago Scientology Audit with Shannon the other night. One of the things that we talked about in that particular case, it was an elderly. It had an guys. I'm tongue tied. My apologies. When I was on her show and I told the story of Mrs. Dillon. One of the things about Mrs. Dillon, her mother, that is the one that was getting the auditing, and her mother was very elderly and very arthritic and very sickly, and she was in a wheelchair. And one of the things that came out in that particular document was the fact that another family member, Mrs. Dillon's husband, he mentioned that this auditor was using and giving the mother-in-law amphetamines before every session. And it kind of made me think of, oh, wait a minute, that's interesting, because in this document, it kind of mentions couple of reasons as to possibly what could have attributed to this particular woman in tonight's story of why and how she ended up possibly having this mental breakdown. Okay, so we're going to get going. On or about October 16th of 1968, a Mr. Edward Romans called this office to inquire if the FDA had any knowledge of the Church of Scientology and their use of the Hubbard e-meter. He also wanted to know what action the FDA had taken against them. He was told by this inspector that the Dallas office had more knowledge and that he could write for and would receive any public information. The Dallas district office address was given to him at this time. So a few days later, on or about October 23rd, 1968, a Mrs. Edward Romans, her name was Beverly. So Beverly called this office. She said that her mother, Velma Johansson, is in the Ben Taub Hospital in Houston, Texas for psychiatric care. She said that Mrs. Johansson had been attending the Church of Scientology regularly and had been treated with the Hubbard E-meter, and that her family thought that Scientology had caused her mental breakdown. She said that all of her family had taken courses at the Scientology Center and that they and other relatives and friends would be willing to help the government in a case against the Church of Scientology. She indicated that her family is contemplating civil suit against the Church of Scientology as attempts to get city and other law enforcement agencies to take actions have been futile. On October 29th, 1968, this inspector went to the residence of Mrs. Velma Johansson to obtain additional information. Mr. Johansson and his daughter, Mrs. Beverly Romans, furnished the information desired. Mr. Edward Romans was also present for a few minutes and answered some questions. Mrs. Velma Johansson entered the Ben Taub Hospital in Houston, Texas for psychiatric care on October 17th, 1968. Mr. Johansson stated that his wife is 47, 5'4", and weighs 125 pounds. He stated that prior to her interest in Scientology, she was a perfectly sane, normal wife and mother. Mrs. Romans said that her family became interested in Scientology due to the efforts of her neighbors, Mr. and Mrs. Buster and Dot Kearley. They went to the Scientology Center on July 14th, 1968, to hear their first lecture and to take the free personality test. Mr. Johansson stated that the first persons in the family to attend the course included Mrs. Johansson, their 14-year-old son, Eddie, and Mrs. Romans, their daughter. On July 16th, 1968, they returned to the center to obtain the results from their personality test and also paid $15 each to take the Hubbard Apprentice Scientologist course, which included membership in the Church of Scientology. Mrs. Romans stated that they then attended classes for the next 3 weeks on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Mrs. Romans said that this course essentially is a public speaking course in that they learned to speak to people. Mr. Johansson stated that he took the personality test and signed up for the same course on July 29th of 1968. Mr. Johansson stated that at the beginning, they were told that Scientology was not a religion and would not interfere with their family life. They were told that it was simply a self-improvement way of bettering their lives. During this time, Mr. Johansson stated that other members of the family were taking the courses at the Scientology Center, at which he included, and he goes down the list, and there's a whole bunch of people. There's like 10 or 11 people. In addition, Mrs. Romans stated that many of her neighbors and friends have or are active at the Scientology Center. Mrs. Romans stated that the next course taken was the HQS, which is the Hubbard Qualified Scientologist, which cost $30. The dissemination course was then taken, which is free. This is a course in which they are taught how to interest other people in Scientology and to bring them to meetings, etc. I'm just going to interject here that I find it interesting that before they really kind of get going on their courses, they had to take a course that was free, just basically how to recruit people into Scientology. So I find that interesting. That's the free course. All right. Mr. Johansson stated that the family began auditing on August 15th of 1968 and himself on August 17th, 1968. Auditing is using the Hubbard e-meter. Mrs. Roman stated that she was placed on a chair holding a tin can in each hand. The cans are connected to the e-meter by wires. The subject cannot see the dials on the meter. The auditor, the person who reads the dials and asks the questions, then asked her questions. Mr. Johansson said that the questions are quite personal. Mrs. Roman said that the questioning lasts up to an hour or two. She said that the auditor begins with word associations, trying to find out words which are related to emotions, fears, and past experiences that you do not want to talk about. This is brought up again and again until it is thoroughly discussed. Mrs. Roman said that it was like confession of sins. Mr. Johansson said that these people could try to blackmail someone if they wanted to do so. Interesting that he threw that comment in there to the investigator. Mrs. Roman said that this is supposedly to relieve the mind and is revealed on the e-meter when this is done. She said that the auditor keeps asking if you have gotten a quote unquote release yet. After the person says yes, he has to sign an affidavit that he got a release. This is then kept in the records at the center. After being audited a number of times, they were to begin auditing. This involves a number of courses or levels that each person must attain before going to the next level. The first level is the zero or sub-zero, which involves 3 levels: recall, secondary, and in-gram. Mr. Johansson said that he paid in advance for the auditing courses, a total of $617.50 for himself, plus $142.50 for the sub-zero auditing. He said that Mrs. Johansson started the sub-zero auditing, but got it free because she worked at the center as a quote unquote hat body registrar. He said that Mrs. Johansson was at the center every day and night from October 1st through the 16th, 7 days a week. She started her sub-zero auditing on September 23rd, 1968, and finished grade 5 on, grade 4 on or about October 10th, 1968. Mrs. Roman said that her mother was also taking a great number of vitamins, especially vitamin E. Mrs. Romans explained that the center told them to take vitamin E, especially on the days of auditing. She said that the holidays at the center told them that vitamin E gives more oxygen in the body and thus provides for a better stimulation for the e-meter. Mrs. Romans also said that a doctor told her that vitamin E stimulates sexual potency. Mrs. Romans said that it was required to take vitamin E on the day of auditing. So it made me think when the story that I read on Shannon's channel the other night, when they said that they were handing out amphetamines before auditing sessions, so that the person would feel better by the time the session was over. So, and here we have another document, and they're just talking about vitamin E, right? And they're saying, "Hey, it gives more oxygen in the body and provides for a better stimulation for the e-meter." Um, yeah, I don't think so. I think some people didn't know what they were talking about. All right, we're going to continue. She said that her mother was taking up to 8 tablets of vitamin E every day in addition to the other vitamins. Mrs. Roman stated that during September and October, her mother lost interest in the family. She stated that she was no longer concerned with keeping the house clean or cooking their regularly scheduled meals. She stated that her mother stopped going to church and attending any other functions other than going to the Scientology Center. Mrs. Romans stated that on 2 or 3 occasions, her mother came home from the center complaining of complaining of shortness of breath. Mr. Johansson stated that during the first 2 weeks of October, his wife did not sleep well, did not eat hardly anything except to take her vitamin pills, and had once asked him for a divorce. He said that she also thought that she was a god from the that she was a god from the indoctrination she received at the center, that she confused the Bible with Scientology. She was substituting words of the Bible with those of the Scientology Center. On Wednesday, October 16th, 1968, Mr. Johansson stated that his wife came home in the morning and said that she had died at the center. He explained that she had fainted. Later, he said that she had spoken of committing suicide while in the garage washing clothes the same morning, but had stopped because of a sign on the wall reading "Stop." Mrs. Romans explained that her brother had STP motor oil stickers on the wall and that her mother interpreted these as "Stop, change life, and start Scientology." She explained that this was one of the sayings of the Scientology Center. Mrs. Romans said that on Tuesday, October 15th, 1968, her mother had told her that she was a god and that she was going to Los Angeles, California, to the Org Center for power processing. Then she would have the power to heal, a touch assist. On Thursday, October 17th, 68, the family had finally decided to take Mrs. Johansson to the Ben Taub Hospital for psychiatric care. Mr. Johansson stated that they had been trying to take his wife to the hospital all that week, but she refused to do so. He said that they decided to trick her into going by saying that Mr. Johansson had hurt his leg in an automobile accident. When Mrs. Johansson did not show up at the center on Thursday, Mrs. Halliday called and wanted to bring her to the center for good. Mr. Johansson said that he told Mrs. Halliday that he had been in an accident and was going to the hospital. He said that she wanted to give him a touch assist over the telephone, but that he refused to talk to her any longer and also refused to go to the center for the touch assist healing. He said that before he could leave, Mrs. Halliday came charging into the house, demanding to see Mrs. Johansson. Mr. Johansson said that Mrs. Johansson was in the garage washing clothes and that they tried to get Mrs. Halliday to leave before she came back into the house. Mrs. Roman said that Mrs. Halliday refused to leave until she had talked to Mrs. Johansson. Mr. Johansson stated that by then he was quite upset and hit her with his fist, knocking her down. Mrs. Romans said that Mrs. Halliday still did not want to leave, and they had to drag her by the arm out the front door. Mr. Johansson said that Mrs. Halliday then sat in her car on the street outside the house for an hour before she finally left and they could take Mrs. Johansson to the hospital. Holy cow, people. Ladies and gentlemen, is that crazy? Whew, stalker much? My word. All right. Both Mr. Johansson and Mrs. Roman said that they got no benefit from the center. Mr. Johansson said that he quit the center around September 15th, 1968, and that he had finished level 4. And Mrs. Roman said that she quit around September 3rd, 1968, after finishing the sub-zero level. On October 29th, 1968, a visit was made to the Ben Taub Hospital Psychiatric Clinic, and Dr. Walter DeFoy, a resident psychiatrist, was interviewed. Dr. DeFoy said that he had been treating Mrs. Johansson since her arrival. He said that Mrs. Johansson is acutely psychotic, that she is presently under a religious delusion that she is a god. His prognosis is that she is a paranoid schizophrenic. He stated that she may have been schizophrenic most of her life. He said that Mrs. Johansson told him of over 30 operations, many of which were exploratory, in which she was complaining of pain, etc. Dr. DeFoy said that she was extremely manic and that in the past she has gone off on tangents for days at a time, such as sewing constantly, reading the Bible, etc. Dr. DeFoy said that her family, both immediate and on her side, is very nervous. On the 17th of October, when Mr. and Mrs. Johansson were entering the clinic, Mr. DeFoy was not sure whether it was Mr. Johansson or Mrs. Johansson who should be admitted because Mr. Johansson was so upset. I'm just going to stop right there, ladies and gentlemen. The poor man was so upset because of the crazy lady trying to come and take his wife back to Scientology. So this poor psychiatrist had no idea probably what happened. But yeah, and the guy must have been out of his mind just trying to get his wife to a hospital. So I get where the doctor's like, oh, which one of these people should I admit right now? Is it her or him? Oh, these poor people. Dr. DeFoy said that Mrs. Johansson had 2 brothers, one of which committed unaliving during or right after World War II, and the other has had 3 nervous breakdowns, been admitted to the state psychiatric hospital in Raleigh, North Carolina, and has been treated with shock treatments. He said that this case has been selected for presentation before the Texas Medical Center panel and has been covered extensively by the department. Dr. DeFoy said that he did not believe that the e-meter or the Scientology Center had caused her problems. He believes that this Scientology kick was something to replace another mania, which she might have entered into otherwise. He said that she is presently being treated with Thorazine and that ECT, electric shock therapy, is being considered. Dr. DeFoy said that he has not heard of any other similar injuries to this one. He said that he said that he was being transferred and that another resident would be in charge of the case. On October 31st, 1968, a visit was made to the office of John Harland in Houston, Texas. Dr. Harland said that he was quite surprised when Mrs. Johansson was taken to the hospital. He was not aware of the Scientology interest, except that she had not been in his office as much recently. Dr. Harlan said that he thought that he was the family physician and stated that Mrs. Johansson has only been in his office 6 times this year. He said that this is strange because she usually comes into his office at the drop of a hat. Dr. Harlan said that her first visit was in 1961 and that she was periodically suffered from respiratory problems. She has been treated for a virus, gastrointestinal trouble, and nausea. He stated that one time he put her on a liquid diet and that she uh, and that the I'm sorry, my apologies. He stated that one time he put her on a liquid diet and and she also has had arthritis in the right elbow. Doc 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 Oh my goodness. Dr. Harlan said that he has prescribed antibiotics and antihistamines to her at various times. In May of 1967, she was to take a low dose of calcium 3 times daily, but she only took this periodically. Dr. Harlan said that the only vitamins prescribed was some vitamin B1 supplement in conjunction with her normal diet, which he said might not be enough for her. Dr. Harlan said that Mrs. Johansson is psychoneurotic and is anxious and tense most of the time. He said that the background that she supplied his office only included 4 operations. And he said that Mrs. Johansson recently quit work and stopped smoking around the beginning of the year, and he was quite pleased with this because of her respiratory problems. Dr. Harlan said that he thinks that she probably sees other doctors besides him, but does not know for sure. He also said that both daughters of Mrs. Johansson are extremely nervous and have had marital problems in the past. Okay, so I'm going to stop right there for 1 second because um one of the things that I find so strange is how a couple of these doctors are describing her as being this kind of nervous Nelly, this, suffering from, mania or schizophrenia or things like that. But her husband was like, she's been perfectly fine until she started going to the Church of Scientology. So I want to just kind of keep that in the back of our minds that this is a man who lived with her. He's her husband. I think he would probably know her better than these other, you know, this one doctor who only saw her a couple of times, and then a couple of doctors who saw her after she had already had this mental breakdown. So I just want to kind of, before we go any further, I want to just kind of remind you guys to think of that. On November 14th, 1968, a Mrs. Levy, a social worker at the hospital at the psychiatric clinic, was interviewed. She said that apparently Mrs. Johansson has always been neurotic, as Mr. Johansson plans on a monthly drug bill of around $75 for her. Excuse me. She said that this is evidently one reason why the family had become interested in Scientology and why Mr. Johansson had allowed the family to spend as much money as they had at the center. Mrs. Levy said that evidently the family had been very strict in the past and that there has been family trouble, and from her discussion with Mrs. Johansson, the doctors and the family, she has concluded that the Scientology interest has merely precipitated that which was there and not caused it. So she's basically saying that Scientology didn't cause it. She already had these underlying conditions. And then she went to Scientology and then she went crazy. I still find that I'm still not buying it. I don't know about you guys, but I am still not buying it. Other information regarding the Scientology Center was also obtained from Mr. Johansson and Mrs. Romans. Mrs. Romans said that the center tells people attending the center to stop taking all medicines and that they use touch assist to cure physical illness. Scientology tells them not to talk to any new source, investigator, police, doctors, government people, and especially the US Food and Drug inspectors. Mr. Johansson said that since his wife has been in the hospital, they have received phone calls from people demanding to talk to her and to know where she is. He said that he thinks the center is trying to get her to stay at to stay at the center in order to get what money they do have at the present. Mr. Johansson said that he has spent over $2,000 at the center and showed this inspector several canceled checks. It should be noted that 2 of the checks were deposited in a Switzerland bank account. Mr. Johansson said that he is going to try to get his money back somehow and that he is trying to bring pressure against the center so that other people will not be taken like he was. Mr. Johansson said that he would use physical force if needed. This inspector and Mrs. Romans told him that he should not think of using force and that he should let the law enforcement agencies do their job. Mr. Johansson stated that he and his daughter have contacted all of the county agencies, including the city district attorney, but that they are either unwilling or unable to do a thing. He asked if the nonprofit status of the clinic should be checked into since 2 of his checks were deposited into a Swiss bank and that they are satisfied that this is not a nonprofit organization. This inspector told him that the IRS might be interested in this and that he could contact them if he wanted to. Mrs. Romans stated that she knew of 3 e-meters in the Scientology Center and that there might be more. She said that they are used both in the house and in the garage type building in back of the house. Mrs. Romans stated that everyone active at the center uses the e-meter as they are required to be released in each of their sessions. She said that once you become an auditor, you have to have an e-meter in order to, quote unquote, audit other people. She gave the following list of people whom they think to have e-meters. So they give a list of people, and these I have not come across any information on any of these people, but because they are Scientologists or were Scientologists, I'm still going to name their names. Okay, guys? Otis and Betty Halliday, director of the center and owners of the franchise. Remember, Betty Halliday is the one that Mr. Johansson decked and threw out of his house. Joe and Sally Thompson, Bill and Bobby Wilson, Briz and Judy Powell, John Niven, Jim and Elda Elger, and Buster and Dot is it Searly or Kearley? Pat and Layla Flanagan, and RC and Joyce Rowland, and their daughter, Tammy. Both said that they knew none of the above people would cooperate as they were definitely anti-FDA and that none of their relatives were auditors and therefore did not have the e-meters. Mr. Johansson said that most of the e-meters used an electrical plug-in, but that he had not seen a cord on a couple of machines and therefore concludes that they may have been battery powered. He said that he could not feel any electrical current. Mrs. Roman said that she got a definite tingle in her arms. Mr. Johansson said that he could not feel a thing while holding the cans. After a meter session, Mrs. Roman said that other people at the center always complimented the individual on how well he or she looked, how the eyes were so clear and sparkling. Both said that the owners of the e-meter also audited people in their own homes besides at the center. Both stated that no medical claims were ever made to them for the e-meter other than to enrich and improve their lives. Mrs. Roman said that the Kearleys were talking of having their own franchise in their home. She stated that they had a supply of tape recordings and printed material already in their home. Mrs. Roman said that her mother had been taking a large amount of vitamins under the center's direction. The vitamins included calcium, B1, vitamin C, vitamin E, vitamin A, and protein. She said that her mother was taking 8 times as much vitamin E as she should and would frequently take a bunch of capsules several times daily. She said that her mother obtained the vitamins from the health food store um, in Shepherd Plaza in Houston, Texas. So now they're going to list what they found in the home. So the vitamins found in the home of Mrs. Johansson are as follows: 30 tablet bottle of 250 milligrams protein, 100 capsule bottle of 100 milligrams of thiamine chloride, which is vitamin B, 50 milligrams of thiamine chloride, vitamin B1, 100 capsule bottle of 200 international units of vitamin E and wheat oil, 250 tablets natural vitamin C. The following vitamins were manufactured by, let's see, is it Woolens Pharmaceutical Corporation in Farmingdale, New York. So she also had calcium lactate, 1,000, 10, it says 10 grains. I'm not sure what that means. 1,000 tablet bottle, vitamin A, 5,000 USP units, 1,000 tablet bottle, and vitamin E, 100 international units, 100 capsule bottle. So we're gonna just stop right there before we finish and before we go any further. And I am going to share with you guys. I'm going to pull this down. So, if she is taking I mean, listen, we all know vitamins are good for us. We know vitamins and minerals, and right, it's really healthy for us to do and for us to take all, supplements and that type of thing. But her family is describing unbelievable amounts of these supplements and vitamins that she was taking. So it got me to thinking, forgive me my allergies. Sorry, guys. My apologies. It got me to thinking. It got me to thinking about, hold on one second. I have to stop sharing this to share my other tab. What kind of symptoms would you need, or would you, what are the symptoms of taking like excess amounts of vitamins? Hold on one second, guys. It's for some reason it's not. Hold on. All right. So I'm going to pull up 1 second. I am so sorry. Here we go. New tab. There we go. Okay. So we're going to pull it up together. Can you wait? I got to make sure you guys can see the screen. Oh, good. Okay. Sorry. All right. So you guys can see. All right. So, all right. Overdose. So check this out, guys. It says vitamin E overdose side effects. Although the major hazardous complications of elevated vitamin E levels include bleeding, there have been others mentioned. These include thyroid problems, weakness, emotional disorder, gastrointestinal derangement, tenderness of the breast, and was it thrombolytis? Throm thrombophlebitis. There we go. I got it. Let's see what the vitamin A. Let's see what vitamin A overdose side effects happen to be. The toxicity symptoms of vitamin A include nausea, vomiting, headache, dizziness, irritability, blurred vision, muscular incoordination. Acute toxicity is rare and is more likely to occur after consuming synthetic forms of vitamin A, such as the retinoid medication, whatever. I don't know what that medication is. Who cares? Okay, let's check out B1. Let's check out B1. Whoops. Let's see. B1. Why does this keep doing that to me? Hold on. Let me move my mic out the way. B1. There it is. Swelling, tingling, burning sensation in the hands and the feet, confusion, trouble breathing because of fluid in the lungs, uncontrolled eye movements. What else was she on? It was A, E, calcium. I don't think that was the issue. Vitamin C. Right. What else? Vitamin C. I don't know I honestly, I've never even looked up any of this stuff. Like I knew bad stuff could happen to you, but I mean, nausea, vomiting and diarrhea, heartburn, stomach cramps, bloating, fatigue and sleepiness, sometimes sometimes insomnia, headache, skin flushing. So the point that I'm kind of making here is the fact that she was taking so much of these supplements and these vitamins. No wonder she lost her mind. So she was already taking all of these supplements. They were telling her to take all this stuff and she wasn't eating. Remember, early in the story, right, Brian, her poor liver. Early in the story, they said the daughter and the father, like they were like, all of a sudden she just stopped eating and all she would do was take the vitamins. She wouldn't take anything. She wouldn't eat anything. This woman was already 120 something pounds. She was like tiny little thing. So it's kind of like she's not eating. She's probably not really drinking. She doesn't sound like she was sleeping. You're overdosing on all these vitamins. And then you're perfectly primed to go to a Scientology center and then what? Go through this auditing that makes you crazy by itself made people have mental breakdowns. She was dealing with a lot of trauma. She already had a sibling that had unalived themselves. That alone is enough trauma to make somebody nervous, right? So it's like this poor woman had this firestorm before she walked in the door And then, hey, just start taking all these supplements and then getting all of this, start getting all these sessions and all this auditing and all this in the remember, they started in, let's go back to the document. Let me share it again. Let me share it again so we can look at it together. The date of this document is November 19th of 1968. That is when this investigator wrote this report. They started doing Scientology in August of the same year. So from August until mid to the end of October, she had to be put into an institution. Now, I'm not saying that she didn't have maybe some other underlying mental conditions. That's very possible. But even if she did, again, it's that firestorm that was created, this perfect little, she walks in, she may have had some, maybe she had some anxiety and some depression, maybe a little mania. Okay, so maybe she's bipolar. I don't know. I'm just saying. But then all of the other stuff coming together, and she has this breakdown. It's just, it's crazy to me. It's crazy to me that I would, now again, I don't know, because this document, I have not found anything else on Mrs. Johansson as of yet. And I might, if I do, you guys know, I'll do a follow-up episode. But I don't, I would like to think, because at this point, she's been hospitalized, I think, about 3 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks. I would imagine being off all of those vitamins has got to be helping her. So I don't know. I don't know how it, I don't know if she got better or not. Doesn't actually say. And Brian, let's see. Brian says, when someone unalives themselves, the family survivors will go to any lengths and try anything in hope of ending the pain. I think you're right. I agree. I agree. Oh, Brian, good point, Brian. Too many vitamins can make the deficient in enzymes to utilize them. Oh, okay. And you got another comment here, Brian. Scientology exacerbated any underlying issues, making her believe she's a god, and right, and the side effects. So it's like this crazy, like the perfect storm that happened. And she paid the price. She paid the price. I'm just hoping that they didn't actually do any electric shock therapy. I mean, he said, oh, that they are considering it. I hope she didn't have to have that. I'm just praying. Okay, let's move on and finish up here. Mr. Johansson said, let me move my mic over again. Sorry. Mr. Johansson said that his wife felt so strongly about Scientology that she called her brother Darnell and told him to come to Houston and be cured. He explained that Mr. Trebathan, 38 years old, has suffered 3 nervous breakdowns and has been treated with shock treatments at the state hospital in Raleigh, North Carolina. Mr. Johansson stated that her brother attended the Scientology Center and was audited with the e-meters several times. He returned to Raleigh after Mrs. Johansson entered the hospital. Thank God, what? Thank goodness. Thank goodness he only went there a few times and he went back to North Carolina. Thank goodness. They probably saved the man's life. All right. I'm sorry. Didn't mean to interject that there, but like, whew, okay. Mrs. Romans furnished other information which does not appear to be of any FDA interest. The Scientology Church has ships and intends to take over the world. England has kicked L. Ron Hubbard and the founder of Scientology out of the country. That England will not give work permits to any aliens who enter the country to study Scientology. The Scientologists believe their minds can leave their bodies and take over others, or they can visit other places, and that they can communicate with each other through electrical wires and systems, and etc. Mr. Johansson stated that the Scientology Center normally has a firm where individuals may work to pay for their Scientology courses. He said that this firm is in Houston. It it was pointed out to Mr. Johansson and Mrs. Romans that the interest of the Food and Drug Administration lies in the e-meter, the literature, and possibly the vitamins. It was explained to them that our investigation and results would not be available to them. Both of them stated that they understood and indicated that they would help the government in any way. On November 15th of 1968, Mr. Johansson again stated that they are contemplating a civil suit against the Scientology Center. On this date, Mr. Johnson said that his wife is much better. Okay, so this is November 15th. Okay, so she would have been in the hospital like a month. All right. So his wife is much better, and that she had come home over the weekend of November 9th and November 9th and 10th of 1968, and that she would be home the next weekend. Mr. Johansson stated that she may be released from the hospital November 19th of 1968. During the investigation, Mrs. Levy mentioned above, who Mrs. Levy was the caseworker. She stated that Mrs. Johansson had responded well to the Thorazine, and this inspector does not believe that she received the shock treatments. Oh, thank goodness. I'm sorry, guys. It's been a while since I read this, so I forgot that part. You guys got to remember, I've been going through these documents for so many weeks that some of them, when I get to the stories, I'm like, okay, I forget some of the tiny details by the time I get them to you guys. Okay, so good. So she was there about a month, probably like all this, toxicity out of her system, and she started responding well to the treatment. Like, such good news. Okay. And then honestly, the next section is literally, it's just a summary of what we just read. And the investigator did a summary. Now, the only thing that we are going to talk about, it says, during this investigation, Mr. Johansson furnished this inspector with various letters, pamphlets, and other information regarding Scientology. Other information was collected and attached to this report as exhibits 1 through 41. These are as follows. So a lot of them, again, who even knows what was, okay, we could say, because we all know there's a million different types and grades of vitamins, right? I mean, you could be getting a bottle that has sawdust in it, or you could be getting a bottle that has the real thing in it. Like there wasn't a whole lot of, where people got their stuff, right? So, but look at here, she had tons and tons of a vitamin advertisement, vitamin advertisement, vitamin advertisement, a list of vitamins given to Mrs. Johansson by Elda Elgar, who she was one of the Scientologists. Vitamin advertisement letter. Now, the next two, number 8, number 9, we are going to look at this together because number 8 says the code of a Scientologist. So they found he gave Mr. Johansson gave the inspector 2 pamphlets. One is called The Code of a Scientologist, and the other one is The Auditor's Code. Guess what? We gonna take a look. We gonna take a look at what those are, because this is the first time I have heard of these 2 pamphlets. So I pulled them up and we're going to take a look at those. Brian, you had a comment. The reason I pointed out enzyme deficiency is because if you can't utilize them, they build to toxic levels much faster. Ah, got you. Got you. Wow. See, it's super complicated. That is why Scientology is so dangerous. When they tell you don't go to doctors, don't take medications, use a touch assist. Yeah, let's just use it to hold on. My microphone needs a touch assist. You know what I mean? Like it's broken, so I need to give it a touch assist here. Let's do that. Oh, and I froze. Uh-oh. Brian, can you tell me, am I really frozen? Oh no. Ay, ay, ay. My screen is totally frozen. Uh-oh. Am I back? No? I think StreamYard is frozen. What a horrible face to get frozen as. It's a StreamYard thing. Everything else is working. I'm back. I don't know what happened. I'm back though. I'm back. Thank goodness I can take those 5 minutes out of the audio version. Brian, thank you for staying with me. Oh my word. And what an awful face to get like frozen at, right? Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, the curse of the Scientologist curse, right? Hey there, Carol. Hi. Thanks for joining me. Everybody who's here, thank you for being here. I appreciate you guys so much. So let me pull this back up. Now I gotta find my hold on. Now I have to find the other tab. Because there was oh wait, hold on. Where okay. So now, so we left off the Scientologies. What did it? Okay. So what I did was I pulled them up. It was the Code of a Scientologist was one of the pamphlets, and the other one was the Auditor's Code, right? All right. So let's take a look at these. Code of a Scientologist. And yes, I'm on Scientology.org. So this is coming directly from them. And look, this right here. Take a free personality test. Curious about yourself? Your first step is to find out more. Can be as simple as a free personality test. Crazy AF. All right. The Code of a Scientologist. It says, as a Scientologist, I pledge myself to the Code of Scientology for the good of all. Number 1, to keep Scientologists, the public, and the press accurately informed concerning Scientology, the world of mental health and society. Oh my gosh, what an epic failure number 1 is. To use the best I know of Scientology to the best of my ability to help my family, friends, groups, and the world. Wow. Fail on number 2 as well. To refuse to accept for processing and to refuse to accept money from any pre-clear or group I feel I cannot honestly help. Fail. Number 4, to decree and do all I can to abolish any and all abuses against life and mankind. Epic MF failure to number 4. To expose and help abolish any and all physically damaging practices in the field of mental health. Wow, they're getting a flunk all the way down, it looks like. To expose and help abolish any and all physically damaged practices, in the field of mental health. To help clean up and keep clean the field of mental health. Lord. To bring about an atmosphere of safety and security in the field of mental health by eradicating its abuses and brutality. To support true humanitarian endeavors in the fields of human rights. OMG, I want to stab somebody in the eyeball. We're only on number 8. Number 9, to embrace the policy of equal justice for all. Well, are we seeing that out in LA? Absolutely not. No. To work for freedom and speech in the world. To actively decree the suppression of knowledge, wisdom, philosophy, or data which would help mankind. When's the last time anybody or any protester or anybody has gotten a real answer or even an opportunity to communicate with the Scientologist? That's just not happening. So they're not trying to help mankind, okay? To support the freedom of religion. Not all religions, only theirs. That's not a religion, it's a cult. To help Scientology orgs and groups ally themselves with public groups. Oh, okay. So, safe pointing. You want to do a bunch of safe pointing. To teach Scientology at a level it can be understood and used by the recipients. MLM. That's an MLM vibe. To stress the freedom to use Scientology as a philosophy in all its applications and variations in the humanities. Freaking epic fail. To insist upon standard and unvaried Scientology as an applied activity in ethics, processing, and administration in Scientology organizations. Word salad. To take my share of responsibility of the impact of Scientology upon the world. Wait, let me read that one again. To take my share of responsibility for the impact of Scientology upon the world. Yeah, why don't you Scientologists take number 17 and put that to the top? And then that way you MFers can go to jail. That's how you can take your share of responsibility for the impact that Scientology has had upon the world and shove it up your ass while you're at it. I'm sorry. That pisses me off. 18, to increase the numbers and strength of Scientology over the world. Well, you're failing at that. Number 19, to set an example of the effectiveness and the wisdom of Scientology. There is no wisdom to it. Okay. You just make people crazy or terrified. There is kind of no in between. There's only kind of two buckets. People are either terrified or they're crazy. The last one, to make this world a saner, better place. Wow. Mm, ah, mm. Epic fail. This is such BS. All right, let's take a look at the auditor's code, right? It says this code first appeared as a chapter in the book Dianetics, the original thesis written by L. Ron Hubbard in 1947 and first published in 1951. Subsequently, many hours of auditing administered by auditors from around the world provided Mr. Hubbard with information to refine the code and thus improve the discipline of auditing. The Auditor's Code was revised several times in the 1950s and 1960s, and the final version published in June of 1980. The Auditor's Code is a fundamental tool of auditing and of life. As L. Ron Hubbard wrote in Dianetics, the Auditor's Code outlines the conduct survival pattern of man. The clear operates more or less automatically on this code because the basic axioms of Dianetics and Scientology comprise the fundamentals of thought itself. What works in auditing also works in life. Such bullshit. Okay. Auditor's Code. I hereby promise as an auditor to follow the Auditor's Code. Number 1, I promise not to evaluate for the pre-clear or tell him what he should think about his case in session. I promise not to invalidate the pre-clear's case or gains in or out of session. I promise to administer only standard tech to a pre-clear in the standard way. I promise to keep all auditing appointments once made. I promise not to process a pre-clear who has not had sufficient rest and who is physically tired. Oh my gosh. Liar, liar, pants on fire. Jeez. Because we know that they don't do that. I promise not to process a pre-clear who is improperly fed or hungry. We know that isn't true either. I promise not to permit a frequent change of auditors. That one's funny to me because obviously there's a lot of turnover. They move people around like chess pieces on a board, right? Like, yeah. I promise not to sympathize with a pre-clear, but to be effective. Oh, okay. This is the part where they teach them like not to basically be robots and not be human. I promise not to let the pre-clear end session on his own determinism, but to finish off those cycles I have begun. In other words, I'm going to hold you in a room until I say you get to leave. So, yeah, you're going to be my prisoner. Until I say the session's over, not you. I promise never to walk off from a pre-clear in session. I promise never to get angry with a pre-clear in session. I promise to run every major case action to a floating needle. I promise never to run any one action beyond its floating needle. I promise to grant be not what is it? Benignness to the pre-clear in session. I don't even understand that one. I don't know. That one I don't even get. I promise not to mix the processes of Scientology with other practices, except when the pre-clear is physically ill and only medical means will serve. When the heck do they get anybody medical attention? BS. I promise to maintain communication with the pre-clear and not to cut his communication or permit him to overrun in session. In other words, you're going to do what I tell you to do and when I tell you to do it. I'm in charge. I promise not to enter comments, expressions in turbulence into a session that distract a plea that distract a pre-clear from his case. I promise to continue to give the pre-clear the process or auditing command when needed in the session. I promise not to let a pre-clear run a wrongly understood command. I promise not to explain, justify, or make excuses in session for any auditor mistakes, whether real or imagined. Ay, ay, ay. I promise to estimate the current case state of a pre-clear only by standard case, supervision data, and not to diverge because of some imagined difference in the case. I promise never to use the secrets of a pre-clear divulged in session for punishment or personal gain. Bullshit. We know that's a lie. I promise to never falsely falsify worksheets or of sessions. That's probably bullshit too. I'm sure it is. I promise to see that any donation received for processing is refunded following the policies of the Claims and Verification Board. If the pre-clear is dissatisfied and demands it within 3 months after the processing, the only condition being that he may not again be processed or trained. I promise not to advocate Dianetics or Scientology only to cure illness or only to treat the insane, knowing well they were intended for spiritual gain. I promise to cooperate fully with the authorized organizations of Dianetics and Scientology in safeguarding the ethical use and practice of those subjects. There's nothing ethical about the cult of Scientology. If anybody thinks that there's anything about them that's ethical, don't watch my channel again. Don't listen to my podcast. Don't watch because that's bullshit. Ay, ay, ay. I promise to refuse to permit any being to be physically injured, violently damaged, operated on, or killed in the name of mental treatment. I promise not to permit sexual liberties or violations of patients. Well, aren't they lucky that that's number 28 of number 20 of 29? Okay. Epic fucking fail. Sorry for the language, epic fucking fail. They do it all the time. Don't get me. I promise to refuse to admit to the ranks of practitioners any being who is insane. In other words, if I think you're crazy, you've got to go. I don't know. I don't even know what to say. Honestly, I don't know about you guys, but every single time I see this shit, I get more enraged than I was. I get enraged. It enrages me. And that's what I hope that this series does to the never ends that are out there. And I I want them to be enraged by listening to this. I want it to fuel them. I want this information in this series to fuel the people that have never been in Scientology to start advocating for the children that are still stuck there and the elderly that are being abused. That is my hope, my prayer, that is what all of this is about. Every episode that I do is for that reason, to bring these mother effers down. That was rough because I can't believe that there are people out there who actually believe that shit. Like, look at the Johansons, right? We just sat here and talked about what happened to their family, but they caught on. All of them caught on quickly. They started in August. They were done by like early October, mid-October. They were like, "Oh, this is nuts." I think he said his last session was sometime in September or something. They caught on to it. I don't understand why more people don't. I think it's because they catch people in vulnerable situations. And what I mean by that, vulnerable situations, immigrants and minorities. That's what I think. They have these people in these vulnerable situations. They know they can't go anywhere. They know they can't leave. They lock up their passports. Or, you know, yeah, they lock up their passports, but they can't leave and they don't even know. They probably don't even know that the visa or their visa is expired. Who's going to report them? Nobody. Nobody knows they're really here. Right? I don't know. And to know that they are targeting minorities. I did see in one of Street's videos last week, and him and Jessica walked past those curtains over there on L. Ron Hubbard Way, and everything was targeting minorities, Latinos. They keep having all these little functions, right? And everything is all targeted towards these Latinos. Yeah. So they target the vulnerable. Like do you know what I mean? The vulnerable and the able. Let's not forget that. They always go for the able. They don't want anybody hurting or anybody who's in pain, or if you've had, just tell them that you've taken LSD and you are good. You're golden. They are never going to bother you again. Just tell them you've taken LSD in the past. That's what I plan on doing if they ask me to take a personality test. I'm gonna go, "I'm on LSD right now. You still wanna give me the personality test?" That would be funny. I think that would be so funny. I don't know. That's just my sense of humor. But this is a long one. Thank you guys for sticking around for it. It's crazy. The more I read, the more blown away I am at how effed up this shit is. Brian says, I can't believe the family survived. They must have true love and commitment to have stayed together. Exactly. 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 They offer a home for the ones who come in illegally. There's no way to know who's there or if anyone goes missing. Human trafficking and the kids. That's right. Human trafficking. Thank you, Jane. Thank you and Carol for being here too. See, it's hard for me to do stuff on Friday nights. I know it's hard for me to do the lives during the week. Work's just too crazy. I just can't do it. I don't have the energy by the time I get home. Friday nights and Saturday nights and Sunday nights, everybody's out protesting and everybody has their eyes on it. So I know that the replay crew is going to come in and they're going to be checking out this episode. They're probably going to be just as enraged as us. But thank you guys for being here, my faithful friends. I love you guys so, 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 so much. Please remember, no more kids in Scientology. Kids cannot consent. Spread love and kindness wherever you go. And I will catch you guys on the next one.